right, hello. This is the Artificially Intelligent Podcast. My name is Nathan. I am a stand-up comedian, a white, hunky, cracker-ass American comedian in the flyover state of Iowa. Me, Nathan. And then on my side, to me, it's over there, but as you're looking, it's probably there. That's Barrett Antar Goodwin, Black African-American person of color, musician in Philadelphia. Hello, Barrett.
How are you, sir?
I am good. I had an interesting experience over the weekend that I wanted to share with you.
Oh,
and
do tell.
Hear if you had any thoughts on it.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm all ears.
All right.
Rather excited.
I had a couple of gigs and I was happy with both of them. They both went very well. In fact, I got an email this morning it was last night. Doesn't matter. I opened it this morning. Either way, one of them said, "Hey, we really appreciate you coming in and making our people laugh and all that." And that's great. So I'm going to do something horrible, which is I'm going to describe my act, which since it's a comedy act, it won't sound funny because I'm just going to be vague because one, I don't want to do my act right now. And then I tell this joke, but so it's like describing a book you haven't read, or people might not get it. And they might go, "Well, that doesn't sound funny." I'm not trying to be funny right now. I'm going to do an overall. So this is a heads up. This is the trigger warning. That's the thing. I don't know. So, at various points in my act, I always look for audience reactions, but I do specific things. Up front, I discuss the various ways of going through life. And two of those ways, one is, do you want to be a Karen and just be constantly complaining and dour? Or do you want to laugh? And if you're offended by something, instead of tweeting and being a Karen and being offended, do you just want to go, "Ooh, well, you know what? That's not for me. I'll just let it go. And maybe his next joke, I'll like that one." And it gets a really good response. When people are listening, they're like, that does make sense. Why do we, when we get offended by something, stop in that moment and say, "Well, now I'm offended. I can't like anything else. This has lost it for me." I do that in part because of the movie Ted by Seth MacFarlane. Do you remember that? The talking teddy bear?
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember any of the controversy that happened around it?
Not much, not really. I remember there was some, but that's about as much as it goes. As far as it goes.
Because it's Seth MacFarlane, he's doing jokes about religion, about politics. He's doing sensitive topics that shouldn't be. He's just like, he's a bowling ball. Sensitive topics are bowling pins, and he's just throwing his jokes out there.
Yeah.
So the movie Ted, I don't know how many minutes into it, say 40 minutes. Marky Mark makes a comment to the Joel McHale character who's trying to mac on his girlfriend and says, "I hope you get Lou Gehrig's disease." And a guy made national news for saying that went too far. And he actually had the quote, if I remember correctly, that said, "I was enjoying the movie up till that, but then that was a step too far." And I'm like, really? You were enjoying a movie that did jokes about religion and politics and sexism? No topic was sacred until it became personal to you. And I thought that was interesting, that as long as it doesn't affect him, it's funny and it's okay. But once it became personal, like, no, now I'm offended. And that's how we all act. That's how we are. So after laying down the ground rules of my act, saying, don't be that person, I get to a point where I make a joke that could probably be considered liberal leaning. And to back out of it, because I don't like politics, I don't want to talk politics on stage, I point out, I say, "Now, by the way, some people might think that's a liberal point of view. Let me say this. Here's why I hate liberals." And I make a joke. And on Friday night, I was in a small rural Iowa town that I'm pretty sure went for Trump. And when I said, "This is why I hate liberals," they all cheered. They're like, "Yeah, fuck liberals." And then, of course, to be fair, I say, "Now, I also hate conservatives, don't get me wrong, but I don't make jokes about conservatives because generally they're such thin-skinned crybaby snowflakes that when you point out how anti-education, anti-science, anti-reality they are, they get butthurt and start to cry." And for the most part, the audience laughed and went, "Yeah, that's us. Okay, we get it. Ha, ha, ha." After the show, I found out the other comic got cornered by a guy in the audience who I had talked to before the show. He's like, "You going up next? This is going to be great." And I could see him from the stage laughing at all my jokes. And then after the show, apparently that's when he shut down. He cornered the other comic and said, that fucking other comic, such a liberal, fuck him saying he hates conservatives, fuck him. The other comic said this guy was hot. He said he was angry because I said I hated conservatives. And that's the point of this story is I thought it was so fascinating that I said, I do not make fun of conservatives on stage because they are thin-skinned crybabies who just act butthurt when you talk about them. And that's exactly the path he went down. Also being a guy who cheered when I said, don't be a Karen. Yeah, Karens suck. Well, I'm going to complain about everything. People, I would love to have a video camera on hand at all times so I could make a documentary interviewing these people, like in real time, like a camera watching them cheering and laughing at everything that doesn't hurt their sensibilities. And then when I, hit them, then it's like, and again, I was playing the field. I'm being fair. I hate liberals. I hate conservatives. Here's why. And one got a big cheer and one got an acknowledgement laugh like, okay, we get it. And then I move on. I don't harp on it. So that's where I wanted to start. What are your thoughts? Have you ever run into someone like this or people that are hypocritical in nature? I mean, we're all hypocrites on some level. I found it fascinating that one, he complained to the other comic, and two, he was standing 5 feet from me complaining to the other comic. He could have come up to me and talked to me. He wouldn't. Like, if you have a problem with me, come talk to me.
I mean, I think it's really one of those things. It's like, it's somehow related to that human corollary of like the thing that pisses you off.
I just drank that water and now I'm drowning. It went down my lungs. I thought I could suppress it, and then I'm like, nope. I inhaled that water into the lungs.
It's okay. I'm glad you're still alive.
Water goes into tummy, not lungs. Continue. Sorry.
So, I think it's somehow related to that corollary of human beings, where this thing about us, where the thing that annoys us the most about another person is generally this thing that we do that we don't like about ourselves.
Yeah.
Pretty much 99.99999% of the time, that's what it is, right? And somehow I feel like those two things are related, what this guy's doing. Like, I feel like it's this inability to see ourselves objectively, right? Like, we just can't see ourselves objectively. We can see the whole world objectively, but that's it. We can't see ourselves, and that is I think, our greatest flaw. I do find it hilarious because I find that it shows up so much these days. That very thing that you're talking about is the very thing that people are complaining about. It's not even that. Let's take it even a step backwards or farther. Somehow the act of pointing out someone's deficiencies is worse than them having the deficiency, right?
Yeah.
I feel like I grew up in a time in which it was reasonable, my friends, you included, right? Like, you might be the worst of them all. You know what I mean?
But I know where you're going with this, and I'll tell before anybody. I would wake people up to go to morning class, or I would try, like, motherfuckers, we're in college, we're paying for this, let's go. And people would be like, yeah, I'm sleeping in. And right. Like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Like, I actively
right. To you, the act of friendship is it's an active word. It's an action word. It means you do something. And it kind of, it to me, like, what it means to be an adult is to somehow do the right thing, even when the right thing is the harder thing. Right? Like, that seems to be the basic tenet of it, right? And I feel like that's how you feel about friendship. The idea of when someone is your friend and they're in that family, you do what is right for them, even at their expense, right? Like, in a weird way. And those are the kind of people like you, like all of my close friends are like that. They are the people who will tell you about yourself because they care. that seemed to be something that was important when we were growing up.
Yeah.
Now, the idea of telling someone about themselves seems to be offensive. And and like when you say something to that guy, he might know that that's true, but it's almost like you're a dick for bringing it up or saying something about it. Does that make sense?
It does. And I have
You know what I mean,
three thoughts. I have three thoughts. One is, I think part of the problem, and we can discuss this, might be the idea of you speak your truth. Well, what if your truth isn't the truth and it's not filled with facts?
right, right.
The second thought I have is, just because I have this in me, and I agree with you that that's how we were brought up, it doesn't mean I don't accept you for who you are.
Right.
Like, I'm just pointing
Yes.
something, like, you can make the changes or you don't. It's not like I'm gonna, like, well, fuck you, you're not my friend. Or so it's not a dick move where I'm, in your face telling you anything. And the third thought I have is, I made this comment yesterday that you follow any of the news of what happened in Waukesha yesterday as we record this. We're recording on the 23rd, maybe it was the 22nd or 21st, maybe probably 20. Car plowed into a Christmas parade in Wisconsin.
Mm-hmm.
So it turns out it was a rapper with a pretty heavy sheet, well, rap sheet, a rapper with a rap sheet, an unknown rap artist. And my thought was, it seems to me that the very same people who were just celebrating the justice system, saying, yay, Kyle Rittenhouse was found not guilty, the justice system works, they're the exact same people saying, how could this guy with a long rap sheet be let out on bail? The justice system is a failure. And I just found that fascinating that, me personally, I think they should both be in jail, but what do I know? But that Venn diagram of a perfect circle between people saying, good, the white kid that shot those three people, it doesn't even have to be white, but it is, he shot those protesters. He's a hero. Oh, this black rapper, look at him. He was on bail. Why wasn't he locked up? Seems, an inability to look objectively at a situation or look into a mirror and see where you're flawed.
Yeah, it's a funny thing because I think it's funny because like it's such a simple thing, right? Like guy at a show gets offended because you say something that just, it's a little bit too close to home,
Right. And
which
a
is
comedy
kind
show
of
at that, where you should just go, that guy on stage is a mouth clown. Fuck him and what he says. I'm just not going to care.
I mean, the funny thing is that like what I like about comedy, that kind of comedy, is I like it when someone can show me the absurdity of the human condition in a way that makes me laugh at myself instead of feel shame about myself. Right? That's what I like.
Yeah.
I think that if you're able to make people laugh at that, that's kind of your job, is to point out the absurdity of the human condition in a way that makes us kind of okay with the fact that we're all completely insane.
Yeah.
Right?
And that's kind of what that bit that leads up to that is, where I said,
right.
It's funny because I said it sort of leans liberal, but if you really pay attention to it, it leans conservative. What I'm talking about, and again, I'm not trying to be funny, and I am trying to be cagey because I don't want to do a bit on the podcast. I'm talking about the difference between outside influence and parental influence. And I sort of take a stance that's like, this outside influence is okay, it's fine, because it's sort of a liberal stance, but parental influence, that's a conservative stance. And it's funny because that's where I win a lot of people over by, I'm walking this edge that says it's okay to have this happen, because if you don't think that what happens under your roof matters, then you have no faith in your own parenting.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I feel like when we were young, it was okay to disagree with someone. Somehow a disagreement didn't mean you were doing something wrong.
Yeah.
It didn't mean you were mean. Like I remember having knockdown, drag out arguments with my friends about things. And then the ice cream truck would come and we go get some ice cream and then go, you know what I mean? Like, it was like, like, okay, right. Like, I'm often, say, yeah, most of my friends are dicks, right? They're kind of assholes, most of my friends. And that's kind of what it is. It's like, all right, I get it, which kind of by default means I'm probably one too, right? Just because that's just how it is. But like, I feel like it was okay for us to do that. And somehow now I feel like we talk about this all the time about the irredeemability of the enemy, right? Like our enemy isn't our opponent, they're our enemy somehow. You know what I mean? What are you gonna
Well,
say?
it could also just be a function of childhood. Here is a joke
Hmm.
that I worked on that never really went over, so I stopped doing it. Although I thought, and probably the way I told it, or maybe it's just not as funny as I want it to be, but there's truth in it, and I like it. The joke was and this is true. My daughter came home one day crying. She was playing with the neighbor. She just came home. She was crying. She's like, she was being mean to me. I hate her. She was mean. And we're like, was she really being mean to you? Whatever. 10 minutes later, she's like, okay, I want to go play with her again. And we're like, you just were like crying. And she's like, yeah, but I want to go play with her again. I'm bored. And my thought was like, wow, children are so forgiving. They have such a short memory because my wife
Mm-hmm.
is nothing like that. She will bring up the fact that I didn't text her back fast enough 5 years ago when we're in a fight. Like just the idea that, so maybe it's just kids are forgiving and then you grow out of it and you begin to hold on to more. I have no idea.
I mean, I wonder if, my friends are still like that, right? Like, I can get in arguments with my friends, and it's kind of like we get over it. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like, it might take longer, but there comes a point where, like, one of my friends, idiot Brian, who might watch this, Such, to be clear, because I know several Brians, and I don't want them to think I'm talking about them. Yes, you,
Right.
Brian Such, right? Um, I've known the kid since I was 3 years old. Like, literally, since I was 3 years old. He's the first friend I made when we moved to Somerset. He's family. You know, I can fight with him, but I can't imagine not being friends with him. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's like absurd. I've known the guy, he's my brother. You know what I mean? Like, whatever. He's like a knucklehead, but I love him anyway. You know. And I feel like that thing is lost now. Like, I know people who are not friends with each other because of Trump. People who are not friends with each other because of critical race theory. I have friends who are not. One of my conservative friends, speaking of this kind of blindness, says to me, I'm not friends with so and so because they all this critical race theory stuff. Right? Okay, cool. Got it. That's your business. You know what I mean? Then he goes, like, seriously, I'm friends with actual racists and they talk about race less than these people do. And I'm like, so you're okay with being friends with racists,
Right.
but you're not okay with being friends with people who are too anti-racist for your taste. Fascinating. Like, isn't that interesting? And like, he is sufficiently self-aware enough to understand the hypocrisy of his statement, yet still made it with no sense of irony or hypocrisy in him, because there's this blindness. And I think we all have it. We all have it. And you turn that into a joke and still watch it backfire, right? Because the awareness of the fact that we are sensitive fucking snowflakes does nothing to mitigate the fact that we are sensitive. Like, some information, when you learn it, it just changes you. You know it, and instantly you have a perspective shift because of this information. Our awareness of our own fragility is not one of those things. I think, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
What were you going to say?
I have two thoughts again.
Mm-hmm.
One is hopefully the faster one, so I'll do that first. When it comes to your God, I had in my head that you were talking about your God brother. When you're talking about Brian, um, you have this history, so of course you're talking about a unit where I mean, not that you have to get along, but you're going to, or you're going to fight and get over it because you're so close.
That's true.
And
Yes.
someone might make the argument that, yeah, of course you're going to get over it because you're so close. And I would go the other direction and say that me being a comedian on stage and saying, stupid words, if that offends you so much, I find it interesting because it makes me think of Twitter, where, or any stranger, someone after a show says to me, like, I don't find you funny. You're not funny. I'm like, all right. I don't care what that person says because I just don't. This is a stranger that means nothing to me in my life. Now, if an entire audience says you're not funny, I have to take that into consideration. But if I have an audience laughing and applauding and coming up, and so many people came up to me after that show, shook my hand, said you were great. The one guy not liking me is no skin off my ass. So I guess I'm trying to relate that to like this guy in the audience being offended by the words of a stranger. He doesn't know me, so why should he care what I think about him? Whereas you and your God, I keep saying God, brother, you and Brian, you kind of have to get along. I don't know if any of that made sense.
I mean, I know what you mean. And here's what I will say. Again, these simple interactions somehow to me they kind of scratch the surface of these really huge concepts, right? Mm-hmm. I think you raise a valid point. I think that people who care about strangers' opinions in that way, like someone who thinks it's somehow helpful to come up to you and go, I really didn't like your act. You kind of sucked. Like, I don't even know why I would ever tell somebody that, even if I thought it was true. Like, I've seen some bad comedy, I've seen some bad bands, I've seen a lot of stuff, and not once did it ever occur to me to walk up to the performer and go, wow, you suck. Oh, like, that has never crossed my mind.
Right.
I mean, I've never been offended by the fact that they sucked. I've been offended by the fact that I stayed there so long. But that's not their fault. That's my fault.
Yeah.
Like, I could just leave. Like, it's not their fault that I didn't leave, right? And somehow, like, being offended that somebody else didn't practice is weird to me. But unless you spend a lot of money, then you could feel like this shit wasn't worth my money, right? But I get that. But that doesn't
complain to management or the venue, like,
right,
like
exactly.
a refund.
Right, like, yeah, that shit wasn't funny. You want my goddamn money back, Because but like. I think in this weird way that like judgment works, like judgmental behavior works. And here's what I think. Let me know what you think about this, because I might be reaching. I think that people who live in that Facebook, Twitter world, I think that they believe that their outrage has power, right? Like, they believe that when they don't like your YouTube video, give it a thumbs down, that actually does something real, And in order for their not liking your post,
like I said, if you put a video out and it gets 3 likes and 50,000 thumbs down, you might be doing something wrong.
I mean, except that 50,000 people watched your video, so clearly you're doing something right. But I know what you mean.
The Howard Stern thing. People people that love you listen for an average of 3 hours to hear what you're going to say next. The people that hate you listen for 4 hours to hear what you're going to say next.
Right, exactly. Right, there's something about that. But I guess what I'm saying is that, like, I feel like in order for their outrage to have power, their negative words to have power against their enemies, so to speak, then their enemies' words have to have power against them, right? In order for one to be true, the other one automatically has to be true.
That makes a lot of sense.
And so when you say something that's offensive, he has to be offended because he wants to be able to offend liberals in that same way, right? And so in order for it to work, he has to be offended in that way also, right? Does it make sense? It's like this
Yeah.
weird kind of thing. And it's like, I
It's
feel like,
Newton.
again,
For every
that's
action, there's an equal and opposite
yes.
reaction.
Yeah.
There
I
has to be
think,
balance.
yeah. I mean, we're fucked up, like in a way that we do not understand that what stopped me from doing many things in life is when I would see somebody on stage doing what I liked, instead of befriending them, I got mad at them for exposing me to me, for exposing my own fear in not getting up and doing what it is that they're doing. And
Yeah.
because they exposed that to me and were doing something that I actually wanted to do in the way I wanted to do it, I like them even less. Right. And it's
And that's a
like,
very human response. I know. I mean, yeah,
right.
that's,
But it's also remarkably counterproductive
oh,
because the
absolutely.
best thing to do would be to be inspired by that person, to go up to them and tell them how much I appreciate them doing something that I also want to do. And if they and befriend that person and learn how to do it better, like there's 1,000 other options other than be pissed and like sit there the whole show thinking, like having conversations and negotiations in my head with no one present but me. You know what I mean? Right? Like that guy, and I don't know what this guy did, but I imagine that from the moment you said that joke, he spent the whole rest of the show thinking about the fact that you insulted him
Well, obviously,
rather
because the first
than
thing he did was he found the other comic as soon as
right.
it was over to
And
give him
that's
a
what I
piece of his
mean.
mind
Right.
about how
Like
much he
I'm
didn't like
not
me. Which the other
right. I'm
comic
not
was like,
saying,
just leave me the fuck
oh,
alone. He was just sitting there like, I can't believe this guy's talking to me.
right. Right. Like I can't read that guy's mind. I don't know exactly what went on in his head, but for me, when that happens to me to the point where I need to go vent to the first person I can that is going to know the person and the person standing 4 feet away, you know what I mean? Right. Like that to me, that process is from the moment I got offended, I was kind of activated and then just did not stop until I was able to like vomit up my fucking internal nonsense stories in my head
Yeah.
all over somebody else. And it's such a weird thing because I think it's habitual, you know, like that kind of outrage, particularly today. I think that kind of outrage is, it's like that outrage is almost like when you say the Newton's law, right? It's almost, the outrage is almost directly proportional to the sensitivity of the person, right? Like I bet you could
Yeah.
do a balance of like fragility outrage meter. You know
Oh,
what I mean?
absolutely. I agree with that
Like,
100%.
like, yeah, man, like that's
I
some
have
crazy shit.
two quick thoughts. One is the thought from before. I made a note so I wouldn't forget because I wanted to go back to it. But did you watch that Sting interview that you sent me?
I watched some of it. I haven't watched the whole thing yet, but it's interesting what I saw so far.
Yeah,
I mean, what'd you think?
the thing that you said made me think of it because you talked about being inspired instead of sitting there going, oh, I can't, whatever, resentful. And when you see someone doing what you want to do, because Sting mentions that somewhere toward the end, he goes, it was interesting. Like one of my biggest influences was the Beatles because I'm this kid in Newcastle. They're from Liverpool. They're, like 10 years ahead of me. And they gave me permission to give it a shot.
Mm-hmm.
Like these four guys from working class England
Mm-hmm.
made it out of their little town. He's like, oh, well, maybe there is a path out. He didn't sit there and stew and go, well, fuck them. That's what I wanted to be, was a rock
Right.
star. And they went ahead and so yeah,
Right.
it inspiring is a much better option. Being inspired
Yeah.
by. The other thing I
Yeah.
wanted to talk about, and this is where we could dig in deep, possibly as I move my foot and bump my camera. Um, your buddy that said he would rather be friends with racists than woke people. As a white person, you can consider me a double agent. I'm inside the white world. I hear what they
Mm-hmm.
say. Um, I get where he's coming from. And here's
Mm-hmm.
why. If the racists are not talking about the races they hate, if they're just sort of existing, it's easy. You can sort of overlook the bullshit. I'm not saying it's appropriate, but you just sort of like put that out of your mind. Right now, we unfortunately live in a time, and you and I have talked about this, where anything that happens, the first thing you can do, and we can go to is say, oh, that's because of white supremacy or racism. And you have it's not just enough now to be a good person and say, well, I'm trying to raise my kids to be good and accept. No, you have to be an anti-racist. You can't just be a good person. You can't. And at some point, Chinese water torture, like, I sort of find that amusing or tune it out is what I do. I'm like, yeah, you have to be an whatever. I'm just going to be a good person, and you can go be angry and talk about it, how everyone's a victim and how fine, whatever. I don't care. But there is a huge portion of society that gets so that goes like, wait a second, you're telling me I'm a bad person? I don't drop the N-bomb. I don't do this. I have genuine friends that are different races and genders and whatever you want to call it. And you're still saying I'm a bad person. And they begin to shift and say, well, if you're going to lump me in with the Klan and the Nazis, then fuck it. I'm just going to hang out there. Like if I'm going to be a good person and live life and you're still going to say that I'm a bad person, then fuck it. Trump's got my back. I'm going to vote for him. That's how we get Trump, is when you go too far in one direction. And in this case, I'm just talking about the left. You can only push too far before people say, well, he's got my back. And I'm not saying it's right. I'm not saying that I enjoy it. I'm just saying, like, that's kind of the feeling I get. That's the gist I get. Is, I think we've mentioned this. You rarely change someone by screaming at them. I can't remember the last time anyone yelled at me and said, you're a fucking asshole. And I went, holy shit, I am an asshole. I need to be a better person.
I mean, I'll say this, though. You're right. But sometimes you train children through discipline and not reward, And I will say this. There has been no time in American history in which the group of white people who are most upset about this stuff, critical race theory and all these things, right? There's been no time in history that they ever got the race thing right.
Okay, I'm not talking about those people, the ones that are angry over it. I'm talking about the middle ground that doesn't want to associate with
I guess
Trump supporters, the ones that just sort of like get swept up with them, the ones that are like, I do think that history should be taught from a point of view that shows what happened, and they get yelled at. Yeah, but that's not enough. What else? I'm like, there's a whole.
I guess the question becomes this, right? Because I'm not saying that I disagree with what you're saying, but if I said to you that I'm fed up after having gone overseas and seeing what it really feels like to be somewhere where this kind of stuff is just not an issue as it pertains to me, right? There's no sheen of like race over every fucking conversation, right? And I kind of was like, I really felt it. I understood the difference, right? Like, it's something that you read the stories, read Miles and all these people in Hendrix. I really read these stories about all these people. Then you experience it. You're like, oh, that is different. It's like a noticeable difference. If I come back here and then I get into some argument with some conservative, and then I say, you know what, I'm just so sick of this. Like, everywhere I go, fucking Kyle Rittenhouse is doing this, and they did this to Ahmaud Arbery, and blah, blah, blah. I'm going to go join the Nation of Islam. Because, and I'm not even saying the Nation of Islam is full of racists, right? Because I don't know them like that. But to use an example of what is people...
Well, they sure aren't a fan of the Jews, I'll tell you that.
Right, but right. So I can use him as an example, even whether or not it's an accurate one. People, you understand the point I'm making, right? Yeah. If I said I wanted to go start joining them, and I put on my little bow tie and started doing my thing and went along with that, those very same conservatives would think I was fucked up. Those very same people would say, well, that's ridiculous. that guy does all this, and this. How could you side with him? And I say, because they're gunning black folks down in the streets like it's nothing. And they'll say, well, that's not true. And I'll go, well, that's my perception. And you can understand why I believe that. If you see my news feed, you could see why I believe that. So, you know what I mean?
I don't disagree with you. It is the same on both sides. And I think the problem is the loudest voices on the extremes shouting over everyone in the middle and controlling the dialogue and making
but
people
whose
on both
fault
sides.
is that? But whose fault is that, right? Like, and I mean this, right? Like, this has been something that I was thinking about this because I've had this belief since I was a kid, like since my teen years. I've been using this exact phrase. Slavery is wrong, no matter whose hand the whip is in. Right? Like the idea of me somehow having power over someone and then wanting to whip them and beat them and do all these despicable things, that's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. It's not payback. That's me becoming an animal. That's absurd, right? That's not reasonable. I think that the idea of letting the extremes yell and scream just because we don't like what the other people on the extreme, it's like, it's not even that we don't like what the extremes are saying. We don't like the fact that this shit comes into our lives. We don't like the fact that we are confronted with these things and we have to deal with them. But the fact that we never deal with them is why they keep coming in, right? It's like, and so we can either just deal with it and then be done with it, or we can keep trying to not deal with it, and the weight will just get heavier and heavier and heavier and heavier, right? It's like, it's where you, was it you that told me this? Where there's somebody says, you know, a professor said, here, hold this, right? And they go, well, how heavy is it? Well, it's not that heavy. Well, it is if I ask you to hold it for an hour. If I ask you to hold this for 2 hours or 3 hours or 8 hours, this thing becomes really heavy over time, right?
Yeah.
And that's what these problems are like. They're not necessarily big. So everybody keeps going, what the fuck? It's not a big deal. It's like it is if you've been holding it for a long time. Do you know what I mean? And
I do. And do you think that's where we are right now? We're finally having our reckoning, and that's why everything's fucked up. Or, you know, we had one reckoning in the 60s, and now we're having another, and hopefully we get through it, and then, you know, the water's calm again.
I mean, I think so, but I think that the problem is, you know, I got into a conversation with an American dude in Zurich at the airport coming back, and he's conservative. I could tell by his haircut.
Did you see the Saturday Night Live sketch from last week? No. Is he a Republican, or is the person, not he, but Republican or not? I don't know.
Okay.
It's worth checking out.
Okay, I'll check it out.
Just the way you said that made me think of it.
I mean, that's essentially what it was. I could very easily tell by what he said. And then he said something, we're talking about America, and he said, well, you know, since it was founded in 1776, I was like, oh, you're funny. Like, you're baiting me. Like, you're like gearing up for a fight. Like, because I'm supposed to go, no, 1619.
Yeah.
Or I'm supposed to agree with you. And it's like, dude, how come we can't just admit that this place was made in stages? Like, it was made in stages. 1619 laid the groundwork. The groundwork was laid, the foundation was laid, or the hole was dug. And then in 1776, they poured a bunch of concrete in it and made it a foundation. The two things are not separate, but one begat the other. That doesn't mean that 1776 wasn't a big change. Like, you know, I'm like, what, you know, and it's like that kind of stuff. It's like, we can't just agree that this place was built in stages. It has to be this, no, my way is the right, and it's not my way, right? Or here's more importantly, it's remarkable how often my way the right way is the way that somehow makes me feel best about myself, right? It's funny how often those two things coincide with each other, right? What I think is the right way is somehow magically often the one that makes me feel the best about myself. Hmm, maybe I should examine that some, right?
That's
Like, you know what
convenient.
I mean? Right? Like, you know, and so I feel like I understand when people want to disassociate themselves from things that make them uncomfortable, right? Because growth, we like growth to happen in the time frame in which we would like it to happen in our comfort zone, and that's not often how it happens, right? It happens because your asshole friend says, "Come on, dumbass, get up! You're paying for this. Let's go to class." And you're like, "Oh fuck, all right, I'll go." Right? That's often how you end up in class, not because there's some internal drive. It's because of somebody else's internal drive giving you a kick in the pants. Do you know what I mean? That's how most people get most things done that they don't want to get done, you know? And I feel like we don't really understand that in this country. And then we allow the fringes to run their mouths for us because we just can't be bothered. We don't have the time.
Well,
Do
it's
you know
not
what I
we
mean?
don't have
And
the
maybe
time.
that,
It's that what you just said. We live in the most comfortable point in history. I mean,
mm-hmm.
500 channels, streaming, music at our fingertips, massage chairs. I'm just throwing out shit that comes into my
Legal
mind. Like,
weed, free porn. Jesus Christ,
oh my
man.
God. Again, so many
What,
comics
are
I've
you
seen have
kidding?
truthfully gotten a laugh off. We had to go into the woods and find a playboy or a hustler in an old stump tree. Like, I remember that. I remember, I could tell you right
Right.
now from my senior high, go up a hill over a fence and there's a little wooded area. It's like, that's where the porn magazines were hidden. And it's like, yeah. And
Yeah.
now it's just on your goddamn phone. No, everything is too comfortable. So anything that provides any discomfort to us is shocking, it's confusing, and therefore it must be wrong. It can't be
Yeah.
beneficial because my life is so comfortable. Why would this? I shouldn't have to feel bad. I should not have to feel discomfort. And that's why we have such a negative reaction to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And this is something that seems to almost have been seen as privilege, you know? Right. Like way back in the day, if royalty or if any person of privilege felt if they were made uncomfortable by a person without privilege, the things they could do to that person would be insane.
Off with
Do you
their
know what I
head.
mean? Right. Like, and we could do that. And so, like, the more, and it's true, right? The more comfortable we are, the less it's like when we're talking about earlier, the balance between fragility and outrage. There's probably another metric between comfort and
Growth.
fragility, right? Like comfort equals fragility, which therefore causes outrage, right? Which, you know, there's like a loop. I don't know where the starting point is, but it's like a loop where you could
Yeah.
probably start from any one of them and they'll just all lead to each other somehow, you know? Like, but that's
Yeah, it
weird.
makes me
That's
think of that,
interesting.
and I'm probably doing this wrong, but that Spider-Man, that one, that one that always gets used.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah, holy shit. Yeah, that's some funny shit. Because you know, it's funny because the guy said this to you,
No,
or the
no, he
guy
didn't say
said
anything to
this.
me. The
He
other
said this,
comic told me about
but
it.
he said this about you, and
Well, I got
it's
another part to the
funny.
story too. I just remembered. If you,
Yes. What is it?
oh, so um, part of what I was talking about, and again, I want to dance around it because I don't want to give away. But I said I was talking about influence, and one of those influences is books because it's funny how we always come back to talk about circles. We're back to not book burnings, but you know, no, get these books out of schools. And this woman came up to me. She said, "Hey, I just want to tell you that I am a librarian And right now we are fighting about 4 books where people, and I just, what you said was so important to me. And thank you so much. And we got into a little discussion, and I'm like, well, thank you for saying that. I appreciate it. And while this is going on, the guy is 4 feet away crowing about me. And I didn't know this. I didn't know he was complaining about me. I just thought he was talking to the other comic. It was a surprise when he came up and said, man, that guy hated you. I'm like, really? Um, so, because apparently at one point I said, it's funny how these people that really seem to have a problem with certain books have no problem with the Bible and its incest and bestiality and murder and rape and all that. And apparently that guy caught wind of it and just sort of went, like he physically reacted because I'm like, again, you're proving my point. Like I didn't even know you were listening, and you're proving my point that if you can prove that the Bible doesn't have those things in it, fine, I'll listen. But guess what? They're in there. So the fact that you're angry at me for bringing it up instead of going, you know what, I like the Bible. Sure, there's some weird shit in there, but the whole point is that it's a, blah blah blah, and you take it. No,
Yeah.
and so I just thought that was amusing.
Yeah, it's the have you seen the meme with the cat with the glasses and it says, so when you say you want religion taught in school, is that all religions?
Yeah.
Or
Well, that's
and
why
it's like,
we
right.
had that Satanist on, and then Jesus deleted the recording. I won't forget that, Jesus. And then we've tried to get other Satanists on who, sorry, this guy's too afraid to talk to you. Sorry, this one won't respond to any emails, because I think it's goddamn fascinating and delicious that the Church of Satan or the Satanic Temple, I get them confused. We've talked about this. There's the Judean People's Front and the People's Front of Judea. Um, and they don't get along. I think it's fantastic that these Satanists then say, "Oh, okay, well, you want the Ten Commandments? We're putting our statue of Satan in. Oh, you want to teach religion in school? Great. The Satanic Temple says that, like once you open that door for religion." But again, it becomes very narrow. It's like, no, no, we mean the white Jesus, not the brown Jesus, not the elephant with the 10 arms, the Vishnu. Like
Right. Yeah.
it becomes very interesting, like you said.
I mean, it's an interesting thing to me when you read about the creation of this country and you start to read about how the religions would argue with each other. And it's like, right, like you can believe that this is true, but this thing over here is ridiculous. And this notion of that, like when you hear people talking about how the Quran is lies, but the Old Testament or the New Testament is real. And it's like, that is fascinating.
Well,
Like,
it's just fascinating that you go to South Park, uh, what's his name? John Smith, Jacob Smith. Who founded Mormonism?
yeah, John.
John Smith,
Yeah.
dum 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 dum. John Smith marched into town, dum 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 dum. And it's like we can literally, because it is so close, and I'm using the word literally correctly, trace the origins of certain religions to their, let's just say it, bullshit origins. But because there were no video cameras in the time of Jesus, that just has to be believed on blind faith because it's true. And it's like, you don't think that's as sketchy as, Mormonism or Scientology or any other religion you want to talk about? I mean, the difference between Christianity and Jim Jones is probably minuscule. Just at
Mm-hmm.
one point, Jim Jones took a hard left and Christianity made it through the speed bumps of the Spanish Inquisitions and the Crusades.
I mean, do you ever, are you familiar with Christopher Hitchens?
Yeah. I
He
read
talks
God
a
is
lot
Not
of,
Great. Was that him?
yes.
Yeah, I read his book. I couldn't tell you a goddamn thing about it because it was so long ago, but I remember enjoying it.
I mean, he has a lot to say about a lot of this stuff
He's
about,
still alive.
no, I think he just died recently, you know. But it's an interesting thing because as I say, I often wish I was a person of faith. I
Mm-hmm.
often do. Half the songs I write deal with like my own personal shit expressed through Judeo-Christian iconography, right? Like that's a big thing for me. So it's a real thing. That being said, when I think about religion and things like that, It does. I'm often puzzled at the fact that people aren't willing to even entertain the idea that their religion could be wrong and
Yeah.
someone else's could be right. It's not because, and it's like this thing that's baked into the system, right? If you question this, that's the work of the devil. So there you go. Like
Do you,
instant
do you know who
double
Stephen
bind
Fry is?
almost. You know what I mean? Yes, but I'm not. I know him and I can picture his face, but I don't. Not familiar with his work.
I'm not overly familiar with his work. I remember seeing one interview. Couldn't tell you who was interviewing. They were both British, so it was a British show, and I'm not familiar. But the clip was the interviewer, if I am remembering this correctly, and my memory could be wrong, was being a little cheeky, and said like, "Okay, you're a famous atheist. What happens if you get to heaven and you're wrong? What do you think then?" And without skipping a beat, Stephen Fry just sort of went, "Oh, sure. I'll say, hey, God, what's with kids getting cancer?" And then he just started going down a list of all these horrible things. Like he didn't like, well, you know what? At that point, I'll say that I was wrong and God is great. I mean, he just went at him by, like, why does a kid deserve cancer? Explain that to me. Explain this. Explain that. And like the interviewer was,
Right.
oh shit, like
Right.
I did not expect to get backed into this corner so quickly. And it was pretty silly.
Yeah. No, it's true.
I enjoyed it.
I sent it to one of my friends and one of my Christian conservative friends. In his response, I sent a bunch of there's a big debate on whether Catholicism is a force for good in the world. There's this big debate on it, and had a
Sure.
handful. And I think Hitchens was there, and a handful of other people versus some clergy people talking, debating and stuff. And I sent it to my friend, and he goes, "You think they spend more time thinking about whether or not schools are good and this and that. They used to teach Latin in schools and now they barely teach basic math and English,
Well,
and
to be
how we
fair, math
shouldn't
is
be."
racist.
Right. There you go. That's funny. I actually grew up understand my mother would say to me, well, English and things like that are culturally biased, but math is not. Like math is numbers. It's not, you know what I mean? Like she flat out said the exact opposite of that. And
Yeah.
my mom was what we would call a radical back in the day. Do you know what I mean? Like, and she was like, yes, the English and the language stuff is definitely culturally biased. Like, if you haven't read Mark Twain, you're not going to get the reference because they make the assumptions that these are the books you read. You know what I mean? I was like, okay, whatever, you know. But well, there was a point in there somewhere. Anyway, it's
School's
irrelevant.
Catholicism, your
Oh,
friend.
school, right? And so I sent it to him, and instead of actually his what he said was we should be focusing on other things, and this is the conservative thing all the time,
Judo.
right?
Take it and
Is
just sort of, instead of approaching the problem, just sort of twisting it to a yeah, but.
Yeah, right. That's it. Right. It's like it's this amazing thing where it's like, is Catholicism a place that housed pedophiles for years and years and years? Well,
And still does.
let's not talk about that. Let's talk about critical race theory. Or let's
Mm-hmm.
talk about the fact that, like, I can't believe you want to teach that in schools. But it's like like what they say, like, so you're okay if we make jokes about rape and incest and this and that. But the minute we start talking about this, then those jokes go too far for you, huh?
Yep.
Right? It's like you're okay with talking about when we make 9/11 jokes or whatever, and you're okay with that, right? Like when you make the joke about, see, I'll do what you're doing, right? With your thing, you make the joke about work release for
Yeah.
prisoners as
Okay. Yeah, I know
bomb
where you're going.
detectors, right? And it's like people think that's funny, right? They think that's funny. When you start talking about blown up terrorists or gang members, they think it's fucking funny. But if you flip that around and make them the people that get blown up, then all of a sudden they're offended. And it's like,
Well,
right,
I do that now.
you know?
At some point in my career, I realized that joke was biased, or could be taken as
Hmm.
bias. So now I throw in, I'm like, oh, let's do Crips and Bloods and the KKK and the Proud Boys. Like, let's
Right.
even the playing field. Let's put them all in there so that I cannot be seen as someone that is,
Right.
yeah,
Right. And all of a sudden it's like people get offended when they get lumped in there. And that's a weird thing. Like the idea that one might not be right 100% of the time, that being somehow a foreign idea for us, or somehow a hard idea for us to grasp in mass, that's really dangerous. You know what I mean? Like people who know that they're right, like that's
yeah,
dangerous. You know, like
it's
that's a
beyond
dangerous
dangerous.
thing.
Although
You know what I
I had
mean?
a sideways thought, completely sideways, inappropriate. Um, I know what podcast I want to do. Now, there's my watch making vibrations. I don't know why that popped up. As I told Barrett before everything listener that I got a new watch, and it just gave me a notification that I should have gotten hours ago. Anyway, um, you said 100% correct, which of course, as I always do, people are probably getting sick of it. You know, I go, yeah, there is no black and white. There's shades of gray. And when I had that thought and didn't say it, um, I don't know if we can do this over Zoom, but if we are ever in the same place at the same time and record one of these, I think we need to do a live recording watching Soul Man and break it down. You and I watching it and just talking about it and enjoying it and loving it as the Oscar caliber movie that it was when it was made.
Good Lord. Uh, I am sure that movie, in retrospect, like you have to judge history kindly because one day we will be history, you know?
Yep, that is true.
But like for the time when Soul Man came out, it was arguably progressive almost.
I
No, I
mean,
wouldn't go so far as
they
call it
were
progressive,
trying.
but
I'm not saying they succeeded,
like
but I mean, I
right.
think everybody went in with good faith. What if we tried to explore? I mean, it's funny how, and this, what I'm about to say is inappropriate, and I know it. It's funny how Soul Man was looked at as being this horrible thing, yet Eddie Murphy's Saturday Night Live sketch where he dressed up as a Caucasian is championed as, groundbreaking. I mean,
It's the punching down thing. That's what people would call it. I think you're right.
I like what
Here,
Chappelle said about punching down, but okay.
yeah,
But we're
but
over our hour, so we should find a way to wrap this
yeah.
up.
Oh,
That's what I was
but I
trying to do when
mean,
I brought up Soul Man. I'm like, I'm
but
going to segue into Soul Man, and
but
hopefully we
we
can
can do
wrap it
that.
up.
We
And then you
can
took it seriously. You wanted to talk about Soul Man, which I am
no
all about.
no we can
Best
watch
movie ever
it. I
made.
mean,
Haven't seen it in
it
20
it
years.
would be funny to see, but I do think that you're right. I think that it's one of those things where the intention behind the movie was solid, but it fell in line with all of the racial tropes
Yeah, the
of the
execution
day.
not the best.
And but I don't think that their intention was to do that. Whereas now, if that movie came out with the kind of awarenesses that people have, if someone put that same movie out, it would the intention would be to be offensive almost because
Yeah.
you
I
know what I
mean,
mean. But an
if you're not
intention
an
does
arsonist,
matter,
if you're just a normal
you know.
person, you sometimes don't mean to burn down your house, but you were smoking in bed and your house burned down. I mean, the end result is
Right.
the same. So intentions,
Right. Absolute right. The road to hell is paved with good intentions,
yeah.
but intentions also matter.
That's
Right.
why
Like
there's
like
involuntary
both of
manslaughter
those.
versus first degree murder.
Yes. Yes. But I mean, both of those things can exist, right?
Yep.
Like, because at the end of the day, it's kind of like what if we go back to the racist thing? If you're friends with a racist, but you never actually talk about race, then you don't even know your friends are racist. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, unless
Because
they're constantly bringing it up and talking about it,
right, which but most of the racists that I know, that's not what they do. Do you know what I mean?
they
It's the
just
woke people that do that. It's the
they
woke people
pointedly
who are
avoid.
like, right, exactly. Like they're like, oh, I don't like niggers, I'm not going over there. You know what I mean? But like, and maybe they have their strong feelings, but most of them keep them to themselves.
Yeah.
You know, but the woke
This is what
people
we've
will
talked about. It's
remind
always
you
nice
every
to see a
13
Confederate
seconds.
flag because, oh, okay, I know
Yeah.
where you stand. Thank you.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. Thanks for letting your presence be known. I appreciate it.
All
Yeah,
right.
that's funny.
Let's
Anyway, yes.
Let's bring this home. January 28th, the album is on my way. Anybody that listened last week, um, I'll make you jealous. Barrett did send me the video for On My Way, and I have to say, I thoroughly enjoyed it. As I told you, it's like, I don't want to say the perfect video, but for the song, it's, how do I put this? I judge everything by what is it trying to be and does it succeed? So
Mm-hmm.
if you are a $200 million budgeted movie that can't even be entertaining, I judge you on that. If you are a independent artist with no money making a video, I judge you on that level. And for whatever money you guys put into that, I mean, it came out perfect. I can't imagine the budget
Mm-hmm.
was big. So given what you had, the decisions that were made and the shots that were made, oh, we're going to set the
Mm-hmm.
band up here. Oh, Katie's going to be here. She's going to sing about this.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and she's in this location too. It was
Mm-hmm.
very clever. It's like,
Yeah.
yeah, when you're scrounging like, oh shit, the grocery store's closed. These are the ingredients I have. Like, what is it, Master Chef? When you're just given a few ingredients, you guys
Right.
came up with a beautiful omelet.
Oh, thanks, man. Yeah,
I,
it's
I
fun.
really enjoyed it. It's a good first
Yeah.
single.
Yeah,
I
good
like the
stuff.
video. Do you have a second video that you're going to start filming for the one after that, or
I think we're gonna do Got Me Good. I think that's
okay?
what we're
But do you
gonna
have a
do.
video line? Because this one, perfect,
Yeah, we're gonna I think we use the same guy. We're figuring out locations now,
nice.
like how to pull it off again. So
So it's
we'll see what happens.
the best way I'll say it to anyone listening. It is not a movie in the sense of storytelling, but it is kissing cousins where, as I said, something's being sung. And so there's a location that says, yeah, this is where, but it's not overly linear. It's just very clever is
Yeah,
the way I found it. And I really
yeah,
enjoyed it. It's a good song. I think
yeah,
the
it's
video
good stuff.
complements it perfectly.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I had one small, tiny complaint that I'll tell you. And I don't know who made this decision, but I just thought it was interesting that there are plenty of shots of the band playing, and they're playing, and then somewhere toward the end, even though you're all playing, she puts on a guitar. It's like, but she just had the
Uh,
guitar on. Like, I just thought it was odd, the decision, like,
right,
and now she's gonna grab her guitar and throw it on and do her solo, but
right,
she just had the guitar over her shoulder. So that was my only kind of jumped right out at me, like, well, wait, why is she
right,
like when she
right.
first approaches the band, sure, that's where that shot goes. You grab the guitar. I just found it odd that after several shots. So anyway, that was my one thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I
But
can
it's a
see
great
that.
video.
Yeah.
The album
Yeah,
is
brother.
on my way. You can
Indeed.
find information about it and the band at katiehenrymusic.com.
Indeed,
You
you
can,
can.
she is at Katie Henry and all Katie Henry or at Katie Henry Music on all
Katie
socials.
Henry Music.
Yep. But then, more importantly, antargoodwin.com if you want to learn about the musical director for the Katie Henry band and or the bass player I've been talking to that, he and I talk every week. So antargoodwin.com. And then I told you last week I had two new reviews. I put one of them up last week. I'll put one
Mm-hmm.
of them up right now as I talk for the book We Are 100. I don't know what quote I'm going to pull, but I know I had two more positive
Mm-hmm.
professional reviews, not Amazon. Although I love the shit out of Amazon reviews. Those are very helpful. Some arguably more helpful because that's where people look. But yeah, the book is We Are 100. It's available on Amazon. And I got to get started on another book because, yeah, I'll push this one till 1 year. I'll give it 1 year that I'll talk about it. And
Mm-hmm.
then I got to shut up and move on and do the next project because I don't want to be that
Mm-hmm.
guy like 5 years ago, I wrote a book. Did you buy it? So, all right, NathanTimmel.com for all things me. My friend, good seeing your face, good hearing
Yeah,
your
you
voice.
too, man. Absolutely.
And if
Yeah.
anyone was just listening to this podcast and I said good seeing your face, it's also on YouTube. We run an audio version of this and a video version. So,
Dude, it's amazing.
yep. All right.